Welcome back. Today I'm doing another Puzzle Rush Survival, but this time on Lichess, where it's called Puzzle Streak. But I had to flip the screen around because they put the streak on the left side of the board instead of the right, which is what I'm used to. Here I don't know why I wouldn't just capture the queen in this situation. That's got to be the answer, right? Okay, they're coming after my passed pawn. I'm pretty sure I should just move that pawn forward. I don't know why not. Okay, well that's two. Okay, and yes, I realized my camera is switched around. I I did that so it would look like I'm looking at the board instead of looking off the wrong direction. All right, what's the answer here? Do we have a check? I do not have a check. I do have a capture here, which would just get recaptured. Don't know if that's the best move. What's going to happen after that, though? Do I have anything after that? Yes. After that recapture, I would have this bishop here, which I can draw a new color on Lichess. Okay. I believe that's it, because once the my knight gets out of the way, the bishop is opened to take the other bishop. Okay. I know the puzzles are a little different on Lichess than they are on chess.com. One of the major differences, if you'll see over at the left side of the screen, is it actually shows you which game that these puzzles were derived from. They actually came from actual games. So here I have a couple of options. I can capture this knight with my pawn. Can capture this pawn with my pawn. But I don't think that's it. I don't have any checks. That was the first thing I looked for. But I don't believe I have any checks in this situation. One thing that I'm seeing is if I take the knight first, then the rook is unguarded. Because right now, the only thing guarding the rook is the knight. Right? Right now, the knight guards the rook. But if I capture the knight first, then nothing's guarding the rook. That's one thing that I see. Another thing, I don't know, this probably isn't it, but rook sacrifice here. The king wouldn't be required to take, but it might. And then I could bring the other rook over for a check, but I think the king would just move back in that case. So I believe it's to capture this knight. The only thing that I'm in danger of then is here, which I could just capture back, but that would leave the rook hanging. If I did that, no, if it captured back, I would just take the rook, I think. Okay. All right. I don't know what my record is on this site. I couldn't find a place where it said what my record was. Or my previous streak. My rook is in danger. I don't see any good checks. I do have checks. I mean, but that's not good, right? I would just get recaptured. I have checks like this, but that would just get recaptured. I'm wondering if I shouldn't get my rook out of danger. And if so, should it go here? Because I think that's a great spot for it. Because the queen is on the same file as the king. I am learning to look for queens and kings being on the same file, being on the same diagonal. That pins the queen to the king. But if I did that, if that is my move, then what is white's response? Is it just a recapture? I mean, just sacrifice the queen for the rook. I think that's what I would play if this were a game. Okay, so I just take the queen with check. Okay. That's 5. There was a little counter underneath also, which is weird. I'm going to change this and recrop that just a little bit to show the little counter underneath. It shows how many I've gotten right. That's handy. Let's see. This knight is threatening here. But that knight is guarded twice. However, moving my queen would leave this unguarded. And there's a battery built up here. Do I have any checks? I don't think so. Now here's a question. Would something like this be advisable? If I capture their knight with mine, it opens up this diagonal to my queen, but my knight would be targeting their queen. And I would already be a knight ahead in this situation. Because, well, as the board lays, I'm down a piece. I'm down a bishop. Okay, so this puts me, evens up our piece count. If they take back, I get their bishop. If they take my queen, I take their queen. And they get my knight, and I get their bishop. That's the only thing that I see, really, here. See, what else what other possibilities would they have if I did that? I think those are the two main possibilities. They either simply recapture and I take their bishop, or they take my queen and I take their queen, and they take my knight and I take their bishop. Okay. That one worked out. I didn't see anything else. Here, well, there's a pawn hanging. There are checks. I like this check right here. The knight check forks 2 pieces. Well, 3 pieces, really. And it just wins the rook outright, because nothing is guarding the rook right now. That looks like the best move. Because with a knight check, the only option is to capture the checking piece or to get out. And there's nothing that can capture the knight there. In fact, it would be guarded by my rook. So the king would just have to move out of check to any number of squares, right? So it couldn't move there, but pretty much anywhere else. The king could go here, 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 and then I would capture the rook and be threatening the queen at the same time. Okay. I might have overthought that one just a little bit, but it wasn't too bad. I'm at 7 now. So let's see. I do have a couple of checks, which is going to be the first thing I'm going to look for. The first one that I see is the knight check. That's the first one that I saw, which is a fork of the rook and the king. And the queen. It looks bad because it looks like the pawn would just capture. However, the knight getting out of the way opens up my queen to get the rook. That seems like an okay outcome here. Because we're fairly even on material. I would be giving up a knight for a rook. And that would come with check. Okay, my second candidate move, the second check that I saw, was the queen check over here. But that doesn't have nearly the forcing power that the first one does. Because that gives the opponent several choices to get out of check. And then there's no follow-up. So I think the knight check is the better one. The triple fork, giving it up for the pawn, getting the rook with check. Okay. I believe this one, just like on chess.com, starts out with easier or slightly easier puzzles and then gets more difficult. Oh, this one says the rating of the puzzle right up there, 1290. Okay. I should pay attention to that to see if they're actually getting more difficult. And it tells you what game it's from, what kind of game it was from, and the rating of the people who played the game. I like that. There's also a place on Lichess where you can go, I don't know if it's your puzzle dashboard. I think it's the puzzle dashboard, where you can see that if there's any puzzles actually from your own games. And last time I checked, there I think were 2 puzzles from my games. Here it looks like I should take this rook, and then have a passed pawn. Because right now my passed pawn is in danger from the rook, and my rook is in danger from the rook, and I'm in danger of getting back ranked if I don't take care of this problem right now. Is there anything else? I do not have any checks. And I think if I do anything other than move this rook or take that one, then they're taking me and it's checkmate. So I believe my candidate move has to be capturing this rook. But wait. If I do that, this pawn's going to capture back, and then it's going to be directly threatening my other rook. So I would need to then move that rook. And I won't yet be able to move my passed pawn. But I will be able to move this passed pawn as soon as my remaining rook is out of danger, I think. That's what I'm going to try. Okay. So now I have 2 passed pawns. And one is definitely far enough away from the enemy king that I don't have to worry about it. But I have a rook in danger. So the question is where to move this rook. Can't capture here because I just lose a rook. And am in danger of back rank at that point. Same thing if I capture here, I get recaptured and I'm in danger of being checkmated on the back rank. So I'm wondering if I shouldn't. Also can't move here or here because of those pawns. So should it just be a coming back? Or should I try to win the race to the back rank? That's kind of a bold plan. If I move this pawn and I lose my rook, then I queen on the next turn. And that would be worth it. But I don't know if that's the best move. Let's see, what else could they do? If I did that, they could bring the rook back really quick to prevent me from promoting. And then I could take this pawn. That seems more forcing. Now that I've thought about it, I've given it some thought. I think moving that pawn forward is more forcing than just trying to save my rook. If I just try to save my rook, for example here, one of those 2 squares, but probably the back one, then my opponent has 3 passed pawns here, connected three passed pawns that they can begin moving forward, and also protected by a rook. So I'm looking at this. I like the blue better. Okay. Well, that's what I'm going to try. That was it. Okay. Sometimes a little risky is better. Do we trade queens or do we not trade queens? If we trade queens, then I get the bishop too. I think that's pretty good, right? That's pretty good. That's what I'm going to do. Yeah, take the queen and the bishop. Okay. 10, yay. Again, I don't know what my record is on this site. Well, I have chased their king just a little bit, but I'm in a little bit of a sticky situation here. My queen is hanging. So I need to move my queen. Candidate moves. Here, let's check. Which would, I mean, they could move their king, but they would probably capture back, and then I could recapture with my knight or my pawn. Or no, I have to move the queen first. I was going to say I could take the rook, but then I just lose my queen. My queen is in a bad spot. Okay. Why don't I just take their queen? Let's make that the candidate move. Just capturing the queen. Yes, they can capture back multiple ways, but then I get the rook. Right? I think that's better than saying check, because if I check first, they take me. I have to capture back first, and then I don't, and then they get another move before I have a chance to take the rook. Okay. I'm down significantly. I can get the bishop. I can pick up the bishop pretty easily here by checking on c1. The king would be forced out here, and then I would take the bishop. My opponent would still be up at that point. So that actually might not be the best option. You know what is even better? I just saw rook to c1 check. The only legal move for the king is to a2. And then knight to b4 check. Forking those two pieces. All right. All right. That bishop is coming after my support pawn, which is the only thing guarding this rook. Okay. Oh, no. There's another pawn and a rook guarding the rook. What am I thinking? But that's clearly what this bishop is going for, right? Check. Wait. What about check? And then I get the rook. Because right now I'm down on material. I'm down 2 minor pieces. The opponent is up 2 minor pieces. But if I take one of them right now, then I'm only down 1 minor piece. And they can capture back with either the bishop or the king. And then I will take the rook. That's my plan. Because if they take the rook first, this knight comes in. Check. They have to do something there. Okay. I'm down again. These puzzles like me being down on material. Well, that pawn is in an inconvenient spot. If that pawn were not there, I would check and I would be forking the 2 pieces, right? But there's not a way to force a pawn move. And right now my knight's the only thing guarding that pawn. If I move my knight, this is the dilemma. If I move my knight anywhere, the opponent captures that pawn. If I don't move my knight anywhere, the opponent captures my knight. And either way, I'm in bad shape. So, my desperado move would be to go here anyway. Check. And I think the only response would be for the opponent to capture with their pawn. I would recapture with my pawn. Then they couldn't take this. The king would have to chase after my pawn. I would move it forward, threatening the rook, and then one of those pawns is promoting. That's my plan. I seriously thought it was going to go for my pawn, but it went the other way. So let's threaten promotion. Okay, that was the right answer. But unlike chess.com, this one jumps quickly to the next puzzle. Oh wait, I didn't know you could just choose not to do that. Yeah, I'll leave it on. It's faster that way, isn't it? Here, okay, we're fairly even on material. Looks like my opponent has a couple of extra pawns. That is a bad idea because it leaves my queen unguarded. There is this move, which is a check, which would force a response. But then what would I do? You know what? There's also this. That even though it's completely defended by this pawn, it's a check. This is a forcing move. They don't have any choice but to capture or move out of check. In either way, it opens up this line for my bishop to capture their queen. This also forces a response and opens up the bishop, but the queen just moves out of the way, right? That would just be a knight trade. This wins the queen for a bishop and a knight. Okay, that was better. Looks like we are even on material. However, there is this pawn move that the opponent has just made has weakened these squares around the king, the dark squares. And I've noticed that both my diagonal moving pieces are on dark squares at the moment. So I'm wondering if I go here, that threatens checkmate, right? So the opponent would be forced to respond. So let's say I go there. It's not a forcing move, but it's threatening checkmate on the next turn. So what would the black's response be? I don't think they would check here because the bishop guards that square. Sorry, I'm going to use different colors. The blue line is a candidate move. These green lines are going to be guesstimations. So yeah, I don't think they would do that. What would they do if I went there threatening checkmate? They could go here with this pawn blocking the bishop, right? And that the pawn is protected by the queen. But then what would be my follow-up? I wouldn't have a great follow-up there at that point. I might have to think about this one for a minute. Okay, I have thought about it for a couple of minutes. Some other things that came up to my mind were like a possibility of a rook sacrifice, But that just clears this pawn, and then I still end up with the same idea that I started with, and it's not much better. I thought of... I mean, that's not great. I mean, we would end up with a pretty cool row of 4 pawns in that situation. But I'm not seeing anything better than threatening checkmate here. I just think that my opponent's possible response of moving this pawn forward was pretty strong. That's a pretty strong defense against my checkmate threat, and I don't know what to do about that. So I'm going to have to do it. I'm going to have to do it anyway. That was it. And they didn't move the pawn forward. They moved the knight here to guard against the checkmate threat. Wouldn't the pawn move have been better? Because here I just win a knight. What was wrong with that pawn move? I don't know. Okay. I also don't know how to go back and analyze these like I do on chess.com. Clearly I don't play this on this site as often as I should. I don't see any checks. I do see, I do see some threats. For example, moving this pawn threatens the bishop. Oh, and the bishop would be trapped. The bishop is trapped by its own pieces here. It would be trapped by this pawn here, and this square is guarded by my other pawn. So that seems like a great move, right? Because none of my captures look good. That doesn't look good. That's actually the only capture I can threaten right now. However, this looks good. And if the bishop were to capture, knowing that it's lost, it might want to take a pawn out with it. When I recapture, I have this open file with my rook. So that's what I'm going to try. Okay, 17. I think also, I probably should have mentioned this, but I think one difference between the puzzle streak here and Puzzle Rush Survival on the other site is that I think on this one, when you miss one, you're done. So you don't get 3 chances like you do on the other one. Well, we are even on material, but we're not about to be. If I capture, they're recapturing with check. I'd have to block. Are there any other options? There is an option. There's check. But that just forces a king move, which doesn't have to be capturing, right? They can just hide behind it. But if it does recapture, then we have a check. I don't know if that's good or not. And then I don't know if that's good. I don't know if that's good. I know that the king I know that if I checked here, the king could not move this way because the bishop would be open to that square. So the only options for the king would be here, here, or to recapture. So and if it didn't recapture, then my next move would be to take the rook. And then I would take this one. Obviously. Right? Capture here. Capture that to promotion, so it'd be with check. So, well, they would have to come back and take it here. So that's got to be my best move. I don't have anything else. Okay. It came forward. So now I have this check, which wins that rook. Okay, 18. What have we here? We have a knight who has jumped in close to my king, but not for a great reason. It can't really do anything from there, can it? Oh, it guards this, but that's not really a mating threat, because I would just move out. But then there would be a follow-up check. Maybe. I'm not sure. So that is threatening something. That's guarding this square in the corner, h8. I have a couple of candidate moves. One is just to take this bishop with check. But I don't know what the follow-up would be, because they would just capture, right? Take with check, capture. Oh, and then without that bishop guarding this square, I could follow with check here and win the knight. I think. I don't see... I mean, I have a check here, but the knight just takes that. So I'm going to check here. Oh, it took with the queen. That's a good idea, because now the queen guards this square. But I just take the queen, right? Maybe not. Because if I capture the queen, they could capture back, but they don't have to. They could check here, and then when I get out of check, they'll get my queen. But then we would just have traded queens and rooks. That's got to be it, though, because again, I can't check here now since they recaptured with the queen. This spot is still guarded. Can I check anywhere else? I was just assuming they would take with the pawn because of the rook back here. I'm going to take the queen. Okay. They went with that check, which is going to win my queen. But then I'll get a knight at the end of it, maybe? Because I only have one legal move. Okay. There's this. And if they take my rook back, I get the knight. All right. Oh my, some of these get pretty complicated. This one says it's rated 1584. Let's see. This looks pretty early in the game. We both still have several undeveloped pieces. I don't see any checks. This doesn't look like a great time for that sort of sacrifice, does it? Because I mean, it opens the king, but right now it just loses a bishop. What else do I have? I could capture here. They capture back, and I win this bishop, which also threatens the rook. But if I capture here, they don't have to capture back. They could first capture here with check, which I would have to... Oh, which then I could come back with my knight. Okay. Knights can move backwards. Okay, once again, I'm down on material. I'm down an exchange, right? Knight for a rook. I do have checks. Just one. No, I have multiple checks. There's this check. Again, candidate moves in blue. Check. Which forces this or this because the pawn guards these two squares. Then my next move would be here. And that would be mate if the king had gone there. Would not quite be checkmate if the king has gone here. So let's use that one. Right, because that one's checkmate here. So let's not use that. Let's use this one. Check. King comes forward to G4. Then I follow here with check, which forces only move here. I can follow with check. Does the king have any legal moves? No, no, no. All right. I'm getting better at this. It helps to be able to draw the circles. I do that in games sometimes, even when I'm not recording. I don't know if that's probably not good for me in the long term. When I go to play over the board, I'm going to be wishing I could draw circles on the board. And my opponent probably will not appreciate it if I actually draw circles on the board. It's my guess. I do have checks. For example, here. But that's not really forcing, right? And the knight's not in any danger right now. But that is a check. So let's remember that. And it would open this diagonal for this bishop in case that comes in handy at some point. But it doesn't threaten anything beyond the king, which again can just move. 3 different options. And then what would I do next? I mean, if the king went in the corner, then I could check here, but that just falls to this pawn. So I don't think the check is the... Well, there's this check. Okay. Sorry, I don't even know why I didn't see that in the first place. This check forks 2 pieces, and I would win the bishop afterwards and be threatening another bishop. So let's try that. Okay. Just before we do this, there is a check, but that just falls to the pawn. So I think it's taking the bishop. Okay, which forked 2 other pieces. 22. Would be forced to capture. But then it just goes back, right? That was my... wow, I just realized there's a... The whole second row of the things down here at the bottom has disappeared. Okay. Yeah, I was thinking of a check here, which would force the king to capture, and then I would say check again, but then it would just go back, right? And I don't have anything then. So there's something else. There's something else. For example, this recapture with the pawn. But then I mean, that would open this, but then the king would recapture. And then what do I have? I would have a check, but the king would then just get out of check any number of ways. Let me, again, we're going to pause this one and think about it. Okay, I didn't have to pause too long here, but now my question is, what if I just move my rook over and then I'm threatening checkmate? What's the response going to be? How can white get out of that? Right? This doesn't actually capture anything or even directly threaten a piece or check, but it's threatening to move the rook here, which would be checkmate. So, rook to h7, then white has a turn. What would they do? I don't think they would capture here, because that would just lose a queen for a rook. So I don't think that's what they would do. One thing that they could do is move this pawn forward to give the king a chance to escape, but if they move that pawn forward, then nothing is guarding this knight anymore. So, move this. What else could they do besides move the pawn forward? Because moving the rook over wouldn't help. Right? It doesn't matter where they move the rook along here. This would still be checkmate. So I think they only have... I think if I move the rook here, they only have a couple of options. And again, that one fails to this. So I'm going to do it. Okay. They did the one thing that I said I was pretty sure they wouldn't do. So, okay. Oh, a pawn's checking me. How brave. That's a fierce pawn. Okay. Well, I need to get out of check. That much is clear. If I get out of check this way, to the left, I think that allows the king in here to target these pawns. So I think I need to get out of check to the right. They can't move forward. The king and pawn guard this pawn, and the king guard these two squares. If I move backward, for example, one of these two places, again, the king comes in to target this pawn. So I think it's got to be here. Okay, it was. And now the question is, do I bring my king in? Because this pawn can't go anywhere. So I don't even have to worry about moving this pawn forward. I think I just move my king forward. And that's the only forward place the king can go. Because I need to get over here to hit these pawns so I can get my pawns through. Okay. That was it. I do have a check right off the bat, right here. I do see the two bishops facing each other, but I don't know. Well, and the rook is hitting that bishop too. But I don't know if that's important. Wait, wow. I've been doing too many puzzles in a row if I thought that was check. There's a pawn in the way. So that is not a check, dear friends. That is not a check. This is a check, protected by the queen. And it gets the bishop out of the way of the bishop and the rook. The king could not recapture, so the king would be forced to move this way or this way, at which time I could just capture the knight. That's what I'm going with for now. Check, then take the knight. Okay. Although, it's not really a good follow-up. Not really. It's got to be to take the knight, right? Isn't, because I don't have anything else that's hanging, I don't think. Okay. Do I sacrifice the queen? Or do I say check? Do I check first, taking a piece with me? Then if the king moves out of check, I just take the queen. If the queen captures, then I just take the queen. Well, but I'm still down. I'm still down material in that case, right? Look at this. They've got 2 rooks and a whole other bishop. But I would be left with my queen. And a rook. But this is danger zone right here. I know my rook, well, my rook and my king are guarding it. I guess that's okay. That's what I'm going to do. Okay. Okay. Wow, 26. I do not have any checks. However, I do have a possible trade here. Anything else under threat? I don't see anything else under threat. Once, if I start with that, the only piece guarding that is the queen. Then, what do I have as a follow-up? Because that's just a trade, so that's not the whole puzzle. That's not the whole puzzle. There's something else. There would be, I mean, I could take this pawn, which threatens that bishop. Or I could take the pawn first. But that seems foolhardy, right? The enemy has a whole bunch of pieces pointed at that pawn. So I don't think taking the pawn first is the answer. But taking it second doesn't make a lot of sense either, because even if I deflect the queen from it, well, the queen's still guarding it at that point, just not the bishop anymore. So then taking the pawn, they still have, would still have 3 pieces pointed right there. Oh, my goodness. Well, it's a long video, and once again, I'm just going to have to move to see what happens. So I'm just going to guess it's the bishop move. That was not it. And it played a nice sound for me. What was it? Is there a way to find out? It says I ended my streak at 26, but I don't know if is there a way to find out what the move's supposed to be? Oh, it says what my move was supposed to be. I was supposed to move my rook there. Okay, if I did that, what would the opponent have done? Move the queen, and then I take the bishop. Is that it? Okay, because the rook was guarded by the bishop. All right. Well, thanks for watching. Now we know that my puzzle streak on Lichess is 26.